You take a look at this burnt out car lot, the big pile of rubble across the street. Those are two of the starkest images you will find in this city. And if it seems like the ads have been more negative than in recent election cycles, it's because they have been.
Nearly 55% of the Senate ads nationwide.
It was happening here, where pro-choice demonstrators crowded around the rotunda, shouting for Republicans to repeal Wisconsin's 1849 ban on abortions.
Very small pockets of people confronting the officers, but that's changed as a group has just done this. This is just from a few minutes ago.
The lawyer for Culver says they're open to eventually partnering with third-party delivery services. But there'd have to be some paperwork, a contract the company could negotiate on things like the fees the restaurants are being charged and standards like delivery times. GOP legislative leaders have said they're going to hold off on touching the surplus until after the midterm election, which is now 64 days away. But the district says every year, responding to and repairing problems caused by people putting items into the system that don't belong costs the public nearly $500,000. Meanwhile, the very top of the tree fell off and onto a car. You can take a look at the car in the garage, just crushed.
This is probably the most meaningful picture that we have.
The image Beverly Kiddo still treasures most.
Brandon's in the center.
5 years after the Lake Delton mother lost her son, Brandon Ketchum, to suicide, she vividly recalls the words her Marine said that let her know he was struggling after tours in Iraq and Afghanistan.
Over and over, when he was picking up dead kids' bodies, and he was looking for the IEDs, and when he was picking up these bodies, he would see his cousins' faces in those bodies.
27 News detailed the initial reports after Ketchum sought a fourth inpatient stay for a mental crisis. In July of 2016, the Iowa City VA told Ketchum the unit in which he wanted to be placed was full. Ketchum stormed off. Within hours, he had shot and killed himself.
If you were admitting that you need the help, that takes a lot for a Marine. And then to be told, what does that do to your state of mind?
The following summer, the VA's Inspector General put out its final report on Ketchum's death. It identified some deficiencies in patient care by the system, such as how it documented missed appointments. 4 years later,
we are failing our veterans.
Iowa Congresswoman Cindy Axne drafts a bill this spring aimed at expanding mental health care for rural veterans. The bill was part of a package that Congress overwhelmingly passed and President Biden signed into law.
The bill provides 3 years worth of funding to expand rural mental health programs at 3 different VA centers across the country. Those locations have yet to be determined.
The VA staff will all have vehicles, and they see the veterans in the community or at their home, often multiple times each week.
Dr. Clifford Smith is the director of field support for the VA's Suicide Prevention Office.
It was a tragic situation. VA needs to learn from all of those situations and how we can do it better to provide safety, access, and treatment to veterans when they're in need.
As Kiddo waits to see the law actually take effect, she takes pride in remembering the call she got on June 30th.
It said it was Washington, D.C., and so I thought, well, I have to answer. And it was a secretary calling for President Biden and wanted to know if I would like to talk to him. And I said, well, of course.
President Biden had just signed Brandon's bill into law.
I mean, it was only about 2 minutes, but, for him to call me, reach out to me, that meant a lot to me. Despite of, politics and everything that's going on.
It was then,
right after we hung up,
Kiddo says she could reflect on her journey, Brandon's journey.
I work at a hair salon, and I went out, and there were other stylists there, and I said, I need your attention. I just got a call from the president.
It is bittersweet for Kiddo, since it's a call that comes after she feels her son's call for help went unanswered. Now, however, his legacy is shining light on a system that needed to do better. In Lake Delton, AJ Bayatpour, 27 News.
Yeah, some of the burnt out vehicles like these dump trucks still in place, a shell of themselves,
right here outside the Kenosha County Courthouse. The plan for this afternoon in this park was for the mayor of Kenosha, along with activists and religious leaders, to deliver remarks. However, at the last minute before the press conference was supposed to start, city officials said that the event was being moved inside. From there, it was just chaos right around the corner from here outside the public safety building. Not everyone got inside, and the mayor of Kenosha, John Antaramian, came out to speak with the group on a bullhorn. The protesters, unsatisfied with what he was saying, tried blocking him from going back in. Officers in riot gear then pepper sprayed the group outside the door. While the press conference did eventually happen inside, one of the original organizers says the city should have just kept it outside.
We were all there at the park, ready to go.
This afternoon, some of the burnt out trucks that the city placed around the courthouse last night, as I showed you, they're still sitting in place all around the courthouse. A number of surrounding businesses downtown have boarded up their windows in case the unrest resumes again after dark. And as you can see here in the park, there are still a number of protesters gathered. One Kenosha activist told me her message is twofold. One, the city leaders need to let these angry young people have a platform to be heard. Her message to protesters is if you're not out to be peaceful tonight, stay home. Reporting live in Kenosha, AJ Bayatpour, 27 News. Another mass shooting in America has left at least 10 people dead, this in Buffalo, New York this afternoon. It happened at a grocery store. Authorities say the suspected gunman is in custody. When is the last time you, in your capacity as governor, had an in-person conversation with the family of a murder victim in Milwaukee? Do you think that the legislature should have that power to certify an election versus the executive branch?
AJ, I'm telling you right now that I don't make a practice in the middle of a campaign of reading other states' bill language.
Barnes was also in Portage when he made controversial remarks last summer about the founding of the U.S. New tonight, 27 News has obtained an extended recording of that speech, part of which had not been made public. Is there anything you either regret saying or regret the way you said it? Listerine's own website says it is not intended to prevent or treat COVID-19, though, and you've questioned vaccines earlier in the pandemic. To illuminate about 40,000 bulbs and provide central air throughout a 104-year-old building that spans 525,000 square feet. What do you think in a 12-month period it costs to power the Capitol building?
I would say $80,000.
For the year?
Yes.
Is not cheap.
$240,000.
Higher? Now you're really scaring me.
I'd say $500,000. Ben?
My initial guess was $800,000.
Seeing the building off limits to the public for most of 2020 and it reopening this spring begged the question, did the pandemic and lawmakers going more than 300 days without passing any bills at least save on the energy bill? To find out, we requested the last 3 years' worth of utility bills. It was weird at first. These MG&E bills were cheap. 60 bucks, 100, 150? What? Turns out, there's an explanation. Those are just for the meters at the Capitol building itself, and there aren't very many of those. To find the main source of the power for the Capitol building, you have to go about a half dozen blocks east on East Wash. That leads you here to the Capitol Heat and Power Plant, which has been in operation for more than 100 years. Yes, the Capitol has its own power plant. Today, it still generates steam for the Capitol and other state buildings near the square, but for voltage, it now receives juice from MG&E and passes it underground to the Capitol.
Back then, we actually did produce our own power here. So they had a central plant that could control any state facility downtown.
Back to the cost. Passing through that electricity from MG&E is where the real spending is. Overall, the total invoice for fiscal year 2019 was $918,000. For fiscal year 2020, $948,000.
$950,000. And I'm upset about mine. Well, that is mine. Right?
Comparing months in and out of the pandemic reveals little difference. Look at October. In 2018, about 65 grand. In 2019, 56,000. Then in 2020, during the pandemic, 63,000.
The Capitol's ready to go 24/7 no matter what. Just because it was closed to the public because of the pandemic doesn't mean we stopped operation whatsoever.
Chad Bleefernicht is in charge of the Capitol Power Plant. He says pandemic or not, open or closed, the Capitol's always on.
We always have to be prepared for anything that happens, and the Capitol has to be ready to go at any time.
Bleefernicht says they are working to be more energy efficient. The state is converting all 40,000 lights to LED, including the ones outside that light up the dome at night. Those of us paying the bill might look at the cost and say,
well, what can you do? You got to have the lights on, right?
You got to have the lights on.
But even then, when you're done in a room, turn out the lights. In Madison, AJ Bayatpour, 27 News.